Hey, what's up guys, Sir Emanon here, and welcome to another deck profile on the channel today. So this time it's going to be for Adamancipator for November 2020, and this is a deck that I've been having quite a lot of fun with lately. Of course, it's not the best deck at the moment, simply because the banning of Black Dragon really hindered the deck's recovery, as well as just the ability to push past like infinite disruptions, which is why Black Dragon was so broken to begin with. But it still has the ability as a deck to just pump out very powerful fields. And the very cool thing about this deck in particular is that the end boss monsters that you're trying to have your board be comprised of are going to be your follow-up tools as well to close out the game. So stuff like Leonite and Raptite, if you can survive just a single turn, which you often can, you can use those cards to help push for game, even if you have to invest a lot into them, which is really, really nice. So as per usual, with these deck profiles, I will be doing a live deck building session essentially, where I start off with an empty deck list and then run through the card choices one by one. That way you can sort of see the thought process and why I'm playing what I'm playing, and you can just kind of keep all these things in mind as you build your own lists. Because again, think of this as just a template and a starting point for your guys' lists. And then kind of going off of that mindset, if you want to stick around towards the end of the video, I will be listing off some alternatives that you can consider playing, things that I definitely considered playing, but ultimately cut from the final build due to things like space issues or just cards that I ultimately felt would be better for the strategy that I was going for. But if you guys do enjoy this sort of informative, in-depth content, definitely consider leaving a like on the video. It really does help support me and the channel overall. If we get 100 likes on this video, I will also be doing a test hand video where I'll try to showcase how you can play against hand traps as well. So be on the lookout for that if you want to. Leave a like on the video to get that in motion. Also, just share the video with friends and other people who you feel might make use out of this or enjoy it overall. And if you are new here, definitely consider subscribing for competitive content. Also, if you want to help support me doing these sort of long videos that take quite a while to produce, I actually have a newly released and launched Patreon, so check that out in the description box down below if that is a way that you want to help support this type of detail-oriented content, because the more support we get, the more of these types of videos I can do, which will be better for everyone. But with all that being said, we will go ahead and now just get started into the deck profile itself. So first off, we're going to start off with the Adamancipator tuners. These are the heart and soul of the deck and really should need very little introduction. So we got Adamancipator Analyzer, which of course can summon itself if your opponent only controls a monster. We got 3 Researcher, which can summon itself if you control a rock, and then 3 Seeker, which summons itself if you control an Adamancipator name. So these, of course, Excavate 5, you hit a non-tuner rock, and then you special summon it. Pretty self-explanatory. These are functionally your starter cards, even though they're not ever guaranteed to hit. You want to open with at least one of them, and ideally a combination of these, so you can just special them out in succession. And the more of these you can get out, the better it is for insulating your combos from hand traps, the better it is in terms of just extending your board to be as big as it can be. And so you just want to max out on these. It's pretty self-explanatory. These are also all, of course, tuners, which help you get into Fiber, and Fiber by itself gets you into Raptite with a draw along the way, which really helps accelerate your engine even farther. So definitely you want to max out on these cards. Next up is going to be the other starter of the deck, which I think is a pretty mandatory inclusion, which is 3 copies of Doki Doki. So Doki Doki is a card that by itself allows you to start as well, provided you have, of course, the requisite discard fodder. It's very good because of the fact that unlike other cards that you can play, this card helps you get into the tuners themselves, which is really, really nice in terms of the fact that you can get into Fiber again, and it's one of the cards that also serves as dual purpose because it's a card you can hit off of your tuners, so it works forwards and backwards. So this is a card that you can really, that really helps you, start your plays more. It is vulnerable, of course. Like all these cards are pretty vulnerable to hand traps if you get hand trapped early, which definitely can be unfortunate, and that's part of the deck's fragile weakness that I didn't have previously with Black Dragon around. But if you have, say, like Doki plus Researcher, that helps out a little bit playing around Gamma. And overall, I still think you just need powerful cards that work just by themselves. So this is probably one of the best ways to go about doing that. So next is going to be the non-tuner rocks that you're trying to hit off of your excavations. So we got naturally the Kawaki Meru package. So it's going to be 3 copies of Guardian. This really needs no introduction. It's just a monster negation, which is essentially hand trap insurance. And leaving it on the board is also very good because oftentimes you will have rocks in your name to be able to reveal. And the cool thing is that because we're playing Leonite, and there's quite a big emphasis on Leonite as well, the synchro that is, you can actually use that to bring the Kawaki Mirrors back. And that's one of the interactions that I really do appreciate about these cards specifically. So that is a very, very strong upside. Next is a card that I've been wavering back and forth between 2 and 3, and I still am not sure is the correct ratio, like which is the correct ratio, but it's going to be a supplier. So I'm playing 3 for a while, and I'm like, I want to cut it down to 2, but I want to play 3. So I'll go over the reasons why I want to play 2 versus 3. So the pros of playing 3 is that it is an extender if you have the ability to, link away your materials. That way you can do things like chain blocking and needle fiber. That's also very nice. It's good because it allows you to get extra resources to your hand. So like say you already have a Guardian field and you add just like another copy to your hand, that's your rock right there to reveal for Guardian for the end phase. So that's very nice in and of itself. It's a level 4 and it's an earth, so it works off Doki Doki. You can pitch it to get Analyzer, which is typically what you want to be happening. And overall, it's just a very nice card to have. But the reason I would want to play 2 is that it is once per turn for its search. And because I'm not playing Saryuja in this build, which we'll get to a little bit later, I really don't benefit a lot from searching cards to my hand that don't really extend further, because this obviously doesn't add itself. So because of that, we're not really getting more extenders, not getting ways to build our board even bigger. So like there's really pros and cons to 2 and 3. I'm not sure what I'm not sure what's entirely correct is what I'm saying. But for now, I am going to be sticking with just the 2 because I actually am playing the 1 copy of Overload. And this is actually going to be the last rock, essentially. This is like the 13th non-tuner rock. So mathematically, if you play 13 non-tuner rocks, you have a highest percentage chance of drawing either 1 or 2 in your starting hand, which means that you'll either have 11 or 12 left in your deck. And running those numbers, you'll have somewhere between, I believe it's an 86 and an 89% chance of hitting 1 off your Excavate. So that was like the sweet spot number that I wanted to hit. So I needed a 13th name, and Overload was that 13th card. So like this is a very, very mathematically driven choice. It's not because I think Overload is necessarily a powerful card. Like it is a powerful card, but I don't think it's like necessarily broken. And I don't think, I'm not 100% satisfied with this. Like if there was just a card that can freely special itself that was a rock that didn't require prior setup, something, like Gigantes, but, without the banishing requirement. If there was anything that could just say special this from your hand for free, Block Dragon, that would be ideal to play. But we don't really have that at the moment. So I'm playing Overload as just a way to make the Quacky package a little bit better because you have like more variety hit stuff off of your Adamancipators. Again, the interaction with Leonite makes it so that this becomes even better because then you effectively have 2 summon negations instead of just 1, so that can be pretty huge. And again, now that we have like a fair number of names, like level 4 Earth Rocks to be able to pitch off Doki, we're not really missing out on the 3rd supplier as much. So I thought that this was like a fair enough compromise to where, okay, we don't have to play as many of this card, which is an extender if you draw, but like doesn't do much afterward, in exchange for just more cards that you're effectively just trying to hit off your tuners anyways. So hopefully that made enough sense. The entire purpose is to A, get the mathematics to be in your favor, B, get the typing correct for Doki, and C, have your Quacky engine still relatively contained. So that's why I'm playing the 1 copy of Overload. This is definitely one of the more cuttable cards, but ultimately I felt that it was the best card for its specific spot. So next, I'm actually playing some of the Adamancipator crystals. So these are going to be the non-tuner Adamancipators. So I was starting off with a pretty hefty lineup. I was on 3 Dragite, 2 Leonite. I wasn't on 3 Leonite. And I was actually on the 1 Raptite as well, which is kind of funny. So essentially, I thought, okay, instead of having just 6 Adamancipators that were not named Seeker, by having 12, it made Seeker a lot better to draw. Because this is one of the problems with Seeker is that, like, it's not really live a lot in terms of you just being able to freely special it, unless if either you're going second or like maybe you draw it later into your combo and you can like special it when you have like Raptite on field or something. So by having more Adamancipators, my thought process was like, okay, by having more of these names, we can have this slide more often and have the benefit of just making sure that our Adamancipator tuners just never whiff. The problem is that these cards by themselves just really don't do anything. It's nice to have like the utility that they provide. Obviously, Dragite gets you the draw, which is good because there are a fair number of cards that you want to draw, like pretty much Researcher or Seeker if you haven't had to special them or use their effects yet, you want to draw into, or Signs. And speaking of signs, Leonite works especially well with signs because the interaction with this is essentially if you draw signs plus any way to get into fiber, you can go fiber to summon out a level 2 tuner and then bring it back with signs to stack your Leonite, and then that tuner can excavate the Leonite, summon it. The Leonite stacks the signs on top of your deck, and then you go for Synchro Leonite, which adds the signs right back to your hand. So you get a lot of value off of that interaction alone. So I really, really want to play Leonite for that purpose. This is a card that I definitely was like, I want to keep in my deck at some number. And then I was looking at Rat, I'm like, why am I even playing this? This card only puts a rock from your hand or grave back on top of the deck. And I'm like, there's not really a whole lot of utility in that because the other crystals also can recycle back your Adamancipator synchros. Really any synchro of the same attribute, but for the major purposes of the list, they're going to be the Adamancipator synchros, right? And then they put themselves on top of the deck anyways. So like this is just redundancy in a card that also just doesn't really do anything. That when you like summon it, it doesn't really get any value. So I'm like, all right, let's just cut the Raptite. And then I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna do the play with the Leonite that I was mentioning earlier, I might as well drop the Leonite down to 1, because even if we draw it, it's not the end of the world because I also play Plague Spitter Zombie, which I'll get to a bit later. So I'm like, okay, I can just afford to cut this down, just play the 1-of so that I can stack it when I need to, and then get access to the Signs play if it comes down to it. Because ultimately, this card is only really good if I'm going for Leonite specifically, and that value is maximized when you get your Signs, but you're not always guaranteed to get Signs. But a card that can help you draw into it is the Dragite. And I was playing 2 of this for a while. I was like back and forth on 2 and 3, and this is the card that I like cutting the 3rd supplier for. So it's like either 3rd supplier or the 3rd Dragite, and I figure, well, Dragite's just better to summon off of the tuners because, like, yeah, this can get you the ad of whatever Quacky Mirror, but that's not a card that you can normally use that turn. Whereas this, sure, it has the capability of not drawing you what you need, but it also has the ability to, draw extenders that are very powerful, stuff like Signs and the tuners like I was mentioning. So because of this, I figured this is a card that is good to just have in your deck to be able to, access at all times. So I figured that this is probably one of the better hits just to, summon and then immediately get value before using it for other purposes. So that's why I figured that Dragite is better than the 3rd supplier, but only very marginally. I don't think that it's like super well defined in terms of what is like ideally better. So I think you guys can leave feedback if you think that like supplier is certainly better than the 3rd Dragite, but personally I just like the Dragite a lot more because again it helps you get into cards that you can immediately use for that turn. If you are playing Soryuja, then I would probably play the 3rd supplier just because you get like Special Guardian out of your hand. That's like another interruption that way, but I'll talk again about why I am not playing Soryuja and why I'm not a big fan of it in this deck. But moving on here, we're going to go into the last monster. Well, that's not a hand trap in this deck. And that is going to be the Plague, which I actually did just mention. So Plague Spreader is a card that is there in cases where you need to stack certain things on your deck. So like you can stack any of your rocks to make it so that your tuners hit, which is good, or like your Raptite, for example. So like that's good for that purpose. I am also playing the Dragoon package, so I can actually just throw that in here right now. Let's see, Red Eyes. So I am playing the Dragoon package. So drawing obviously the fusion is very, very annoying. So this is one of the ways that you can alleviate that. And again, just a synergy that you have to be able to put whatever you need on top of your deck and then just hit it off of your like Researcher, Seeker, Analyzer, or Rap type. Like that is very high value there. It's a level 2 tuner, which is conducive to all of your combos with like Martial Metal Marcher and stuff. Oh, I forgot to put the Dark Magician in here. Whoops. Let's do that real fast. But yeah, pretty much any way that you can use this to help fix your hands is nice because realistically, right, whatever you're summoning off of Fiber, if it's just one of these Adamancipators, like it's good that they level 2 tuners because that's what you need to make Marcher and stuff, but they don't actually do anything unless if you open specifically Signs. So I'm like, all right, this is probably the best level 2 tuner that I can play that can make use out of its own effect to, keep extending further, as well as to just put things on top of your deck that you need to at the time. So I really like it for that purpose, and I think that it is a solid inclusion in this list. So next are going to be just the extenders. So I kept talking about Signs, and here it is. It's a 3-of, in my opinion, for sure. This is a card that allows you to really abuse the crystals, and something that I think is pretty undervalued, because not only can you stack the crystals, Oh, there is a reconnection. I'll cut to I'll cut to the next part of the video just in a sec. So anyways, as I was saying before I got so rudely interrupted by Dueling Book reconnecting, was that essentially the value that Signs has with cards such as Dragite and Leonite the Crystals here is that you can get a lot of value by not only stacking them after you revive a tuner so that the tuner can hit them right away and just get another monster on board, but additionally these can revive the tuners back themselves, which allows you to trigger their effects because they're special by the effect of an Adamancipator card, not just monster. So if you need to push like another resource in hand, or if you want to like restack your signs if you haven't gone through Leonite yet, like the Synchro Leonite, then this is just additional options that you have for, you know, getting extra value off of this being, you know, an Adamancipator card by name. So that's why I really think this is a 3 of. It's not once per turn anywhere, so it is a very, very essential card to try and open as often as you can. And it's one of the critical combo pieces to have if you want to really extend your boards really, really far. And then the final extender is going to be a copy of Monster Reborn. Oops, this really doesn't need that much explanation. Can bring back stuff like Dragoon, which is kind of silly. And of course, it's not an Adamancipator card by name, so it has a little bit less synergy in that respect, but it's Reborn. I mean, we're going to play it, right? So that leaves the final 10 spots to be kind of whatever non-engine cards that you want to be. Or I actually thought about playing a 14th non-tuner rock as well, but I realized that as I was playing more non-tuner rocks, I realized, you know, these are just worse cards to have in your hand. Like the non-tuner rocks are tricky to manage because they aren't starters. So like these 10 are not really cards that are fantastic to draw in a lot of cases, unless if you draw one of the previous 12 first. So like you're only really wanting to draw these if you already have like a Seeker or a Researcher. Like same with Guardian in terms of Researcher. Like these are just worse cards to have in your hand than the 12 initial cards. Which is why by playing a 14th rock, you're upping that count from 10 to 11. And I'm like, I don't really want to have that. So I decided to just play another non-engine card instead. So I'm playing Hand Traps, of course, in this list. So let's start off with that. It's going to be 3 Ash, which is incidentally a fire, which you can put in grave for Leonite, which is cool. So if you need that, then that is there for that aspect. But of course, it's just very versatile. 3 copies of Nibiru, which you can definitely change out depending on how the format shifts. I just like it because it is a rock. You can hit off the Synchro Dragite, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, if you want to help stop things, you know, like Virtual World or just combo decks in general, this can really help out in that regard. And finally, I have 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. This also can be changed out. Like you can obviously change out whatever hand traps that you want to. I'm not really playing the Gamma package. Like you can see, oh, this is very clean to be able to play the Gamma package because you have 10 spots instead of just 9. But I really want to make it so that if I'm drawing something off a Dragite or off Cyber Disintegrator, then I want it to be a card that I can use. And I feel like these are the best cards to be able to do that. Nibiru is a little bit questionable if that's my main motive, but I really think that Nibiru is a higher impact hand trap that can work if you have like a fragmented board. Like say you get hand trapped, right? But you're able to have Nibiru in your hand, then at least you can use it. Whereas if you have Gamma and you get like stopped midway through and you have like just random monsters on your field, then you can't use that at all, and you also have a weak board. So I figured Nibiru is better in like corner cases like that. So I actually use the 10th card, and I thought about playing a 10th hand trap, but I figured that Mystic Mine is running around right now, and I do not want to lose to that game 1, especially like on Dueling Book rated. So I'm just going to throw in a copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. You can definitely change this out. Like this is another very cuttable spot. Like these cards obviously all come down to what your metagame is, what you're expecting to play against, and you can of course have as much freedom and liberty with that. And then the next cuttable card I feel is the Overload. And then beyond that, maybe the 3rd Dragite. But again, I was saying that this is like a replacement for the 3rd copy of Supplier, so you probably would play the Supplier regardless. But yeah, this I feel is overall fairly standard if you think about how Adamancipator is being built. There are definitely other cards you can opt to run, which I will again get to later in the alternatives part of the video. But for what I think, or from what I can tell based on my testing, there's not really anything too special or spicy about this. It's just you play 12 starters, you play a good number of non-tuner rocks, and then you play a good number of extenders. You have cards that heighten your ceiling, and you have hand traps, and that's just about the way that deck building goes right now. So with that out of the way, let's just go ahead and move on to the extra deck here. So we're going to start off, of course, we already have the Dragoon, so let's just throw in the Verte to pair with it. Not really anything to say there. And then we have the Fiber, Hcabe. This is essential to a lot of your big board building. So we are of course going to be running that. Similarly, we want to be playing Link Cross. And then with the fiber, you're going to be summoning out a level 2 tuner, whether it be Plague or one of your Adamancipators. And then you're going to use that and a Link Cross token to go into Marcher. Martial Meta Marcher, that is going to bring back whatever tuner that you brought back off fiber. And then typically you're going to be going into Cyber's Integrator, which is a card that doesn't really have that relevant of an on-field effect because we're not playing Cyber's tuners. But if it's Synchro Summon and sent to the grave, you can draw a card. So it's how you get additional value on your way into laddering into Wrap type. So that's like the basic combo, and you essentially just continue from there. And again, if you have a way to get fiber plus signs, your board is going to be at least a Leonite plus another signs revival. So that's going to be like level 8 synchro or just a way into Dragoon. So like that alone is going to be a lot of interruptions if your play just goes unhindered. But if you have a level 4 non-tuner on board when you have fiber as well, then you can skip the Cyber's Integrator step and then go into Herald of the Arclight instead, which is good in terms of getting you hand trap insurance if you don't happen to have Guardian field. So that is a very nice aspect there to have. It's just a very nice card to play against things like dinosaurs. Just having a nice floodgatey type card, very, very good there. Next is going to be possibly my favorite card. It's not the best card in the deck, but it's my favorite one, and that's going to be Leonite. So this card allows you to excavate and add an Adamancipator card to your hand. So that's how you can abuse it with like Leonite stacking signs on your deck, and then you just use this to add the signs right to your hand, and you use it again because it's not once per turn. So I really, really like this card. It's great in follow-up scenarios because you just want to have, like, if you can have this and Raptite, then you can get a special and you can get a potential search. So it's very, very good. And because we're playing more Adamancipator names, because we're playing the crystals, you have more targets to hit off of this as well. Of course, you don't want to really add these to hand necessarily, but it's free resources anyways, like pitch off Dragoon and stuff, like worst case scenario. Also, the effect that you have during your opponent's turn as a quick effect is if you have a fire in your grave, you can reborn any rock. So of course, this can like trigger things like Dragite and Leonite and stuff like that, but you can bring back your Quacky Mirrors, which again I mentioned earlier is the very good interaction and synergy that allows you to really keep these on board and get extra mileage out of them. So it acts as an extra interruption in that respect. Next, we're going to be playing, of course, the Dragite. This is your main board breaker. You don't really enter this card as much because we're also playing Savage, and that, of course, covers more. And you really want to reserve this just because you need to keep an option to have non-targeting bouncing, which is, like, especially just crazy in a format where there are some resistances to, like, targeting and destruction. So you just always want to have access to this. Not really too much to say there. Oh, something I didn't mention with Raptite is the wind that you'll have engraved for its DD Crow effect. This one right here is going to be usually Martial Meta Marcher, because regardless of whether you go for Integrator or Herald, you're always going to be going for Marcher. So that's how you get your wind, even though we're playing 0 winds in our main deck, which is why I felt even more comfortable just cutting the Crystal Raptite, because that card really was just not very good at all. So yeah, Martial Meta Marcher really just fixes that problem. Not necessarily a problem, but like you can leave this on board, which is what you want, because the longer it stays on your board, the more of a threat it is, because it's going to hit another, rock for next turn. So that is why, again, like what I mentioned at the very beginning is that if you keep Raptite and Leonite on the field, then you're going to have so much follow-up if these stick on your field. And like these represent interruptions in their own right. DD Crow is pretty good this format, so just having a DD Crow on your board is also pretty nice. Next is going to be the Gallant Granite, which is the standard rank 4 that everyone is playing in this deck. Nothing really too much to explain here. It gets access to Researcher, which gets you access to Fiber, which gets you to your whole combo. So if you really need to have this as part of your toolbox, then it's there. Honestly, I don't go in it very often because I'm not really playing a lot of like one card rank 4 combos, which is something I actually considered when I was deck building, and something I'll actually get to a bit later is like maybe ways to get one card Gallant Granite. But I thought it wasn't really that needed. I figured that just having this there in like fringe scenarios where like you get hand trapped could be good enough, and that is ultimately what I am deciding to use it for. The next 3 spots are 3 cuttable spots. I think that these cards you definitely should play, like all of these cards, because they all do come up for sure. I see a lot of people still not playing the Cyber's Integrator, which is surprising to me, just because like this gets you so much value. And like in cases where like if you're just going straight into Raptite, like why not get yourself an additional draw? I feel like maybe if you want to make room for other cards in the extra deck, sure, but the extra deck's actually not that tight. So I think that you can afford to play this card just because like drawing into more extenders is always a good thing, or hand traps really. Like that's another good thing about playing hand traps is that if you draw them, then that's just another interruption without having to do any additional work in terms of board building at least. So the last three spots, as I was mentioning, are all cuttable, but they all have their own specific purposes. So the first is going to be the one I think is the least cuttable, which is Salamangreat Almirage. So you could opt to not play this card because it is literally only there to turn your normal summons of like your tuners or like your Doki into into a fire so that you get a Leonite live. That is pretty much the only reason it's there. So again, if you really don't value Leonite as highly as I do, you can opt to cut it. But Leonite is really good. Like once you start playing with it, like, if you play with it in mind, it really can pay dividends for you because this card gets you a lot of value both on offensive and defensive like sides of things. So I really do think that this is something that's worth playing for sure, because even though it is sort of a throwaway, it's like you're literally only using it to put a fire in grave. Like you don't always have access to the crystal Leonite, especially since I cut it down. You're not always going to be drawing ash, so you want to have like just a way to guarantee access to it. So that is the first one. The second one is going to be the copy of a Link Spider, which you'll notice I'm not playing any normal monsters in this deck, but it's really there just for Nibiru, so you can turn this plus any extender into Verite Anaconda. This is the one I'm honestly most inclined to cut. I really don't like that I have to play this card, and I really don't feel like I do have to play it either, but the part of me that really wants to just ensure or like insulate myself against all cases, like specifically Nibiru when you don't have Guardian or Herald, or if they like have Nibiru Gamma, for example. Like I just want to have just kind of a contingency play. Now, to be fair, there's not a lot of extenders that I can summon if I do get Nibiru already, so it's like, why even play this at all? So I will talk about some things that you could play if you want to replace this, and I'm very much on the fence about cutting this. I'm like 55-45 on keeping it at the moment. So this could change, like by the time I put this video up, this could change, honestly. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And the last card is actually possibly my favorite inclusion, and that's actually going to be Virtual World Beast Juju. So this card actually works as a generic synchro, and the effect to send a card only requires you to banish 2 monsters from your grave with the same original type and attribute but different names. It doesn't specify like Virtual Worlds or like Wind Psychics or Earth Worms or any of that. So you can banish literally any of your Earth rocks, and you play a ton of them. So if you banish any combination of these, you can just send a card in the field to the grave. So this is like a very good way. Like if you're going second, you can go into this and then go into Dragite afterward and just clear your opponent's entire board. Or use this to like bait stuff and then go for Dragite afterward. So I really, really like this card a lot. It also randomly can't die by battle with card effects as well if you have 2 or more monsters in your grave with the same original type and attribute. So if your opponent like doesn't like respect that, then you could really allow this to just resolve a lot of your problems. So I think this is a solid go second card. I like it better than personally like the Nightmares, just because you don't have to discard stuff. It uses resources that you're already putting in grave, and it could take care of like anything essentially. So I really like this card quite a lot. It's a very, very nice card to have. So that's going to do it for the extra deck as well as the main deck. So now we're going to talk about some alternatives that you guys can opt to play if you want to. These are cards that I did consider running but ultimately chose not to for various reasons. So we can start off first with Parallel Exceed. So this is a card that is cool because it's a 1-card rank 4. Excuse me, I'm kind of losing my voice here. But essentially it's a way to get into Granite, which allows you to go Researcher and then go for Fiber, which again is just a guaranteed way to get at least Raptite with a draw. And that allows you to extend pretty far afterward. This is also cool because if you get like hand trapped on your normal summon, like say Doki gets impermed or like a Researcher gets Veilored or something, you could turn that into a copy of Almirage and then go for Exceed that way. So that's pretty cool. Ultimately, I found that like in practice, it wasn't going as well for me as I had hoped, and I know that's kind of poor reasoning and a little bit biased because it's a small sample size. So I don't want that to dissuade anybody from playing this card because it is very good, especially in theory. And I think theory is a bit more important than just a small sample size practice when it comes to deck building. But ultimately, I just felt that other cards were a little bit better in like for their slots as far as like synergizing with the Adamancipators themselves. So like all of these like 12 right here that are starters can be extenders in their own right, like later in their combo. To be fair, this does something that the other cards don't do, which helps a little bit better against hand traps. But again, if you're drawing like multiples of your tuners, then that also kind of achieves the same purpose, because like if you draw like any like Adamancipator, Analyzer, and Researcher, or like Researcher Seeker, or like Analyzer Seeker, then you are pretty safe against hand traps in a lot of those cases anyways, because you have like multiple chances to be able to just get more bodies onto the field, and that means more ways against a Guardian, right? So because we're playing 40 and we're playing so many of these, of course, I'm just maxing out. I really didn't think that Exceed was that needed. But again, to be fair, if you get like Nibiru'd, you can go Link Spider and then go Exceed if you hold it. So that's like another good option. So there's a lot of really, really good arguments, and I don't necessarily think it's wrong to play this card. You can definitely find a space to cut for it as well. I just found that it wasn't personally what I thought was like ideal for its position. But again, it's a good card, and I won't deny that. Also, it is a wind, which can help in corner cases with Wrap type. So that's pretty cool. The next one is going to be the Go 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 engine, so the Onomot package. We're talking the para and the pickup and this card and this card and this card. I don't want to read all their names, they're just too long. But basically the Onomot package is, I feel, kind of just a worse version of Parallel Exceed personally, because these require you to play some kind of garnets, or like if you play more of these and they kind of just become cloggy. Like you have to play, you don't have to necessarily max out on these, but you have to play some number of them because they are starters. And like all of the payoff is, again, just for Gallant Granite, while at the same time also using your normal summon. So I really feel like if you want to play a way to get into Granite that badly, I think just play Parallel Exceed personally. Next is going to be Miracle Rupture and its associated cards. So Miracle Rupture, if you guys don't know, is a Foolish Burial for level 4 lower rocks. And if you're playing like the Fossil Fusion package, then you can draw a card if the fusion spell's in your grave. I don't really like those cards at all. I looked at them and I thought they're not very, very good. But this card is good because you can send, of course, the Tackle Crusader. Oh, not Tackle Crusader, sorry. I'll get to that later. Revival Golem, that's the card. Revival Golem. This card allows you to basically reborn itself when you send it to the graveyard, so it's another extender. And this deck is lacking like those types of extenders, because a lot of these extenders all like require you to already be playing, for example, Signs. And this card does allow you to kind of just get a forward body on your board for free, but I felt like that wasn't like super needed. There are other cards you could play if you just want over 4 monsters. I'm not playing those either, because like Granite is good, but I also just value hard drawing the tuners themselves and like just going straight into that play, rather than like try and roundabout go for Granite and then go into the tuners like afterward. So I felt like this wasn't that needed, but admittedly you could also play, I already kind of spoiled it, but you could also play Tackle Crusader with this, because what you can do is send Tackle Crusader going second, and allows you to book a moon stuff, so it allows you to play through interruptions a little bit better. And these cards have great utility, but like they don't do as much by themselves as the rest of these cards, I feel, because like these, like this is an extender and this is like hand trap insurance, and like these crystals allow you to like get Seeker on board as well. So like I feel like these cards don't offer as much in that department, unless if you like already have ways to play the game. So it's a little bit hard, in my opinion, to justify their inclusion. But if you really like this package, then I can't really fault you for playing them either, because they are pretty good cards for sure. Because like this not being able to, or not requiring your normal summon is pretty valuable if you want to just get an extender, and like having a free way to like force a negate is really, really nice. Another card that's kind of tangentially related is actually a new card from Phantom Raid, and it's called Rock Band Xeno Guitar. So this card is cool. If it's sent to the grave, you target a rock in your grave except itself, and add it to your hand, then place a card from your hand on top of the deck. So it's kind of worded similarly to El Shadow App Clone, where you can recycle your synchros and then not have to place any card on top of your deck. But if you do want to place cards on your deck, say like, you know, Dead Red Ice Fusion, or if you want to place a rock for your Adamancipator to hit, that's also a really cool application. And I think with this is also, if it is banished from field to grave, you can Foolish Burial any rock. So that's why like if you're playing Revival Golem, then like you could also play this card. The thing is like this card doesn't actually, it's cool, like what it does is cool, but it doesn't actually, it's not productive in terms of helping you combo as much. So I figured it's not like that worth playing. Now if we still had Block Dragon in the game, that'd be crazy, because you obviously just send Block Dragon. But we don't really have that at our disposal, so I figured it's not really worth playing right now, but it's something to keep your eye on because it is a card that definitely exists for this deck. Next is going to be the Gigantes, if I can spell it correctly. Gigantes and the Rock Spirit. So I would obviously play Gigantes over Rock Spirit because this has an effect that is a heavy storm if it's killed by battle. But ultimately, like this card, it requires already prior setup. And to be fair, I also do like this card in general. But I just don't want to have like dead cards when I'm already playing like non-tuners that can also be dead. This also can't be special summoned off of the Adamancipators, which is unfortunate. So like I figured that it's better to just play the other cards over this. Notably, this can actually trigger the Rock Band Xeno Guitar if you want to like Foolish Burial. So if you want to play this whole package, you definitely can and just take the deck in a completely different direction. But I opted for the direction that I currently did, of course, which is just playing the crystals and having as much synergy with like the Adamancipator names as possible. Next is the Unexpected Die package, which can get you like Beta the Magnet Warrior, or it can get you access to Angel Trumpeter, so you can get access to like rocks or the tuners. This is a bit less important because you don't really need Earths as much, obviously, because there's no Block Dragon. This can still be good if you want like tuner access, but at that point you might as well play Adhara, and I'm also not playing that card, which I'll get to actually next. But yeah, I just feel like this isn't really that needed anymore, because you're playing Garnets, and like the deck doesn't really want to play those Garnets anymore, because like you want to just have as consistent of a deck so you can play as often as you can, in the absence of like just really powerful cards like Block Dragon. So next, as I just mentioned, we have Adhara, and we can also throw in the Madolche Petting Sasor in this category as well. Not that one, this one. So these are interesting cards. I think Petting Sasor is not as good if you're playing hand traps, specifically ones that go to grave, because going second it just makes this card a lot worse. So that is why I'm not playing this card. And then for Adhara, this is honestly a card that I would also consider playing. Like it's probably this and Parallel Exceed that are the ones that I'm closest to playing, because Baking Fiber is always just very, very good. It's just that I feel like I want to have as many rocks in particular. I know I kind of harp on this point, but I like having rocks just to be able to like ensure that I'm always excavating and getting value off of them. Now to be fair, again, like you don't need to excavate rocks necessarily. If you like have this and just any other monster and just go into fiber, and that like works just as well. But I really do value having just ways to be able to spam the board prior to going to fiber as well. Like that's like another way to play through hand traps as well. So it kind of just depends on which way you prefer playing through hand traps. There's multiple avenues to go about doing so, but I just figured that I like this route a little bit more. But again, Adhara is a very, very solid card. I won't be denying that anytime soon. Next is going to be Adamancipator Friends, which is a very cool card. So this card allows you to excavate the top cards of your deck equal to the number of rocks you control plus 5, and then you add to your hand any excavated rock with a level equal to or lower than the number of excavated cards, and then just place the rest on the bottom. And then it locks you into rocks for the rest of the turn. So this is also not once per turn, similar to Signs, which is cool. You can like stack with Leonite, that's also nice. You also don't have to have any rocks at all. You can just go 0 plus 5 is 5, just activate it and then try and find a tuner. So it can be a starter, but like the rock restriction is really kind of what does it in for me, because like what are you really going to be ending on if you are playing this? Like you're going to be ending on Raptite Leonite, which is fair because I'm already kind of doing that. But then you can't really make Herald if you need to. You can't make Dragoon. Now, to be fair, again, like a lot of your power is pretty concentrated in these Adamancipator Synchros, so it's not the worst idea to consider playing. And I think that ultimately there is like certain ways you can make this deck work if you want to really make it centered around a lot of the Adamancipator cards themselves, which is what I'm doing to some extent, but I'm not going that far in. So I figured that like this, cuts off Fiber Access, which is one of the like very powerful points of the deck. So I decided just I rather would play other cards that would be a bit more flexible than this card. Next is a copy of Soyuja Skull Dread, or just Soyuja in general. This card I am not a big fan of personally because you have to use a lot of your resources to get into this. And if you are concentrating a lot of your power into this specific choke point, then any hand trap on it, like Valor or Imperm, or even like Ghost Mourner, really just like stops your turn entirely. You know, just having this being negated. So I don't really like that. I also think that like you should like a lot of time like you're gonna be making this off say like a Link Cross and like a Metal Marcher and then, like maybe like a Cyber Disintegrator and another monster, but like you could use like these two to just make Raptite and that gets you like a guaranteed disruption and a follow up like extender. So I really don't think this is that needed. It can get you stuff like the Guardians out of your hand, which is cool, but I don't think that any extender here off of Saryuja is ever going to be guaranteed. I know it's weird to say in a deck that's so RNG based as it is, but right now I just think that if you're going to consolidate a lot of your resources to a card that isn't guaranteed to get you there, I don't think it's just worth it. Like I think it's worth it to just play, you know, these cards that are going to find you that play like the majority of the time, right? So that is the reasoning for not playing this card. Next is going to be other links I'm not playing because this is a pretty low link monster count if you're noticing. So stuff like IP and like Access Code and like Nightmares and stuff. Like, these are all good cards. I just figured that the other cards are a little bit better and like you actually are okay going into or going second because you have like you're just trying to play through your board anyways. So they do the same thing as what these are trying to do without like directly targeting the cards you're trying to remove. Because like if your opponent just lets your plays resolve, like you're gonna be able to out their board regardless. Like, you're able to put up a negate and then Dragite. So your opponent's gonna have to stop you anyway. So I don't feel like this is that needed. And I feel like again, Access Code is okay. Like definitely it's really good if you play like more links as your focus, but I decided not to focus on those and focus on the synchros instead. If you are gonna play this, I would probably recommend at least a second copy of Hcabe, because that would allow you to go into like Unicorn and then Access Code and do that play. So that would be my recommendation if you wanted to go that route. Next is going to be Union Carrier plus the Buster Lock. I just think that this is not that good if you are getting hand trapped because there's not that many Darks or Dragons that this deck is playing because you can't be targeting Dragoon with it, obviously, and so that leaves your options being like Savage and like maybe Verite Anaconda, I don't really know, but you can go Savage and that's fine, but if you can't get to Savage, then it can be a bit harder, and sometimes even if you don't get interrupted, you can't get to Savage. So I just don't think this is always guaranteed. Like, you can't get to Savage and this all the time. So I figure I'd rather just play, you know, like cards that are a little bit more flexible. Plus, it's just one less brick. So I feel like, you know, like Verite Anaconda Dragoon is like what I would play over these specifically. Plus, you can't really equip Block Dragon. That's not a thing. So that takes a lot of that utility away from this card too. Next is going to be Crystron Quandax and Satellite Warrior. So I'm going to preface this by saying that you should play Second Fiber, of course, if you're going to play these cards, because you're going to use your first Fiber to combo, and then you'd like use another Tuner plus Link Cross to go into the Second Fiber. This is pretty cool, because you can turn this plus like one of your level 6s into Satellite Warrior and get a couple of pops, but it was a little bit tight on the extra deck, and I just didn't really think that that would come up that often, because you have to have specifically a Tuner, whereas like with Verite Anaconda you can just have anything with like your Link Cross. So I figured that like this was just a bit better in a lot of cases. Plus, like, this is better when you get hand trapped. Like, if you get hand trapped, you often aren't going to be able to use these. So I decided that these aren't really that worth it. Same deal kind of goes with like Formula Synchron. This is like another like card that you can tag out with the another copy of Fiber, and then go into stuff like this plus this can make like Savage or like Dragite or something, but didn't really feel like it was that worth it. And then finally is going to be some rank 4s. So Dweller, if it ever becomes like really good again, you can play this card. I don't think right now it's like the greatest. It's okay for sure. Like, it can help stop like dinosaurs. It's decent against like Qinglong and stuff, but I don't really think that it's the best card at the current moment against like Dragon Link or like Infernoble. So that's why a lot of people aren't really playing this card. And then you could also play stuff to out Megaclops, because this deck doesn't really have a good out to Megaclops against Zoo. So you could play Light Dragon at Ignister, which basically is just a pop a face-up monster. Or you can play Giant Hand, which is a weird suggestion. Like, why would you play this? So if you're like Castel or 101, you could play those cards too. But this is a rock if you want to play Adamancipator Friends. So if you're playing Friends, you can actually go into this card, which is a negation. So that makes this a little bit better. So like if you want to play this plus this as a means of both outing Megaclops and just making friends a little bit better so you have more starters, that's a way that you can take the deck. And that's something I also considered. So yeah, this being a rock is also cool. I really do enjoy that. So that is it for the alternative section. Next, we're just going to quickly run through the side deck, which is also always like the fastest part, just because like this is super just dependent on the metagame and it can change like at any given moment. So it's always just a template. So right now I'm tentatively on the Gamma package with Driver, just for like bigger combo decks. Also on Lancia, this is for Dino and what is it, Virtual World, because like cutting off their ways to go for like Chuche pops. Like if they can't banish, they can't Chuche pop because they won't have any resources, and then also cuts off Qinglong, of course, and Desires too. We have Pankratops as just a good generic side. Red Reboot because we're an aggressive deck and we can shut down trap decks. Lightning Storm just as more back row hate. And then 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. So again, this is just like a very generic sort of template. You can change this up. This is always open to sort of just what the metagame ends up being. So that's why I focus on it kind of the least in like deck building just as a general concept, because I feel like side decking becomes really, really important when you're preparing for a specific event, and then that is like a whole kind of game by itself. So that's why I'm never really going to go super in depth for just a generic profile. But that is going to do it for this Adamancipator list. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it and picked up some things that you might want to take into your own lists, as well as if you have other suggestions apart from the alternatives that I already listed, definitely feel free to let me know. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like as well as any thoughts or feedback in the comments. Subscribe for more competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. If you want to, you can follow me on all social media or support me using the links in the description box as always. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys!